Good morning again, everyone. I am so glad to be back. I have been in your church building precisely twice in my life, and it is one of my favorite congregations to visit in San Diego County. I enjoy hanging out with Eleanor, whom I met when I first got here, as well as my beloved colleague, Mary Carter Vale. The three of us, all lifelong Unitarian Universalists. This is the faith that raised us and claimed us. I knew Reverend Everett when he was still an intern and we were serving neighboring congregations in Pasadena. And your recently hired minister of pastoral care is a very, very good friend of mine. I'm so glad that you will get to benefit from the pastoral care skills and guidance of Reverend Casey. It is so good to be back. I'm honored to worship with you. Please, please soften your gaze, bring stillness to your body and to your mind as we enter a time of guided meditation. If you cannot bring stillness to your body or to your mind, that is okay. It is a reminder that you are still alive. Now, in your mind's eye, in however you perceive the world, form a picture. Form a picture. It is 1992. Many of us were a lot younger then. Some of us were not yet alive. Others of us were still a far distant imagining. It is 1992. Remember that world. How did it feel to be at that point in time, like all points in time that is at the end of history? If you were not alive during that time, what do you remember? What have you been taught? What rises to the surface in recollection or teaching? What remains uncertain or unclear? In your mind's eye, and however you perceive the world, form a picture. It is 1992. When you are ready, perhaps blink your eyelids back open and come back to this space. It is 1992, and I am a lot younger than I am now. Most of what I remember of that time is an amalgamation of what I actually experienced as a 6-year-old and what has been taught to me. It is 1992, and the Soviet Union has just fallen, although it mostly dissolved on its own before acknowledging that fact. I come back from winter break to this news from my first grade teacher and look at the map and promptly conclude that it has simply floated away. It is 1992, and we are at the end of history. Sometime in the year, some police officers are very, very violent to a man who becomes almost instantaneously famous, Rodney King. It is not so much the beating that is the issue. that sparks off the tinderbox that we already have come to know in yet another series of LA riots. We had no idea at the time it would be somewhere in the middle of a pattern of riots instead of the last and grandest. It's 1992, and a jury that is mostly white returns a verdict of not guilty after 4 police officers have violently beaten a Black man, and it was on videotape and made the nightly news every night for several months. This sparks days and days of riots all over Los Angeles City, all over Los Angeles County. The National Guard has to be called in. Thousands of people are injured. Tens of people are killed. And a band called Sublime, writes about their recollection, although the day that they actually participated in the riots is April 26, 1992. The song is entitled April 29th because the take on the recording was so good, they decided not to correct to the date. They sing, "It's getting harder and harder and harder each and every year. Some kids went into a store with their mother. I saw her when she came out. She was getting some Pampers. They said it was for the Black man. They said it was for the Mexican and not for the white man. But if you look at the streets, it wasn't about Rodney King. It's about this effed up situation and these effed up police. It's about coming up and staying on top and screaming 187 on a mother effing cop." 187 being the California Penal Code for murder. It is 1992, and it is a hard time to live at the end of history. In response to these times, we have several responses of immediate witness or resolutions of immediate witness. We now call them actions of immediate witness that we pass at our National Annual Convention, General Assembly. They're remarkably similar to anything we would pass today. They are concerned about universal health care. They are concerned about women's reproductive freedom, and we know a regulation of anyone's reproductive freedom, it's the language of the time, is actually the issue. But we are concerned about reproductive freedom, not in Texas, not in Alabama, but in Pennsylvania. And we are called to work with our congregation in the city of Los Angeles to respond to the needs of rioting peoples and also to form a program of racial justice that we do end up creating. And then over the next 20 years, defund, undo, and unmake until it's time for another investigation. It's 2021, we're right here, right now, and we have to figure out, who are we? How do we grow as Unitarian Universalists? And how do we respond to injustice? And I'll give you a little shorthand for injustice. I will call it evil. That's a more religious word. And that helps us pinpoint exactly why it's urgent. How do we as Unitarian Universalists respond to evil in the world? It's 1892. We are Unitarians and we are Universalists. And we're living in a society where we have abandoned the framework for Reconstruction, our plan for rebuilding the nation back better, sounds similar, after the Civil War. In order to keep in power, once again, the Democrats have thrown all of the formerly enslaved Africans under the bus. In Unitarian circles, through the Berry Street essay, an essay series we believe to be the longest running series in all of North America, primarily Unitarian ministers at that time, but now a Unitarian and Universalist stronghold that precedes General Assembly each year. During the time of the Civil War, we barely mention what's going on at the national level. We don't want to have any disunity during this time. We know our friend Theodore Parker is a rabid abolitionist, but we sometimes forget that even he believed in a racial hierarchy that allowed African peoples not to be enslaved, but we were certainly not as smart, intelligent, or capable as white peoples. Martin Luther King Jr. goes on to crib his words in the saying that we now know: the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. During this time of 1892 and onward, we as Unitarians are also participating in the residential school system that takes indigenous peoples from their lands, from their families, and tries to inculcate them with white Western values so as to breed out any difference in what it means to be an American. And in this time, it's exciting. We also see Black people entering both Unitarian and Universalist ministries, but we're treated so badly that we often have to do it secretly, and the consequences are severe. If you want to read more about that, consult Darkening the Doorways by Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed. During the same time, we learn from Reverend Edward Everett Hale that we already have an issue as Unitarians, far be it from us, to think that we are perfect and have been perfect at some point in the past and only need to get more perfect. Perfect doesn't get us free, dear ones. Perfect keeps us in the framework of respectability politics instead of the dynamics of transgressive action, of drastic action, of revolutionary action, where we cannot please all peoples at all times. We have to answer the questions in 1892 of who are we as Unitarians and Universalists? Are we a faith of the white people? Are we a faith of the white liberal? Or were we also the churches that made sure that there was education going on in Southern Virginia for Black communities centered in Universalism? A Universalism that was so powerful that it attracted even the local white people. How do we grow as Unitarians and Universalists in 1892 is a question we have to hold on to, primarily through Western expansion. But we quickly learn that the faith of the Boston liberal doesn't really work well when you have a death call 292 miles away. We know that our religious education programs blossom through Universalism and the prophetic sisterhood, a group of primarily female preachers, many of them barred from being able to enter Universalist ministry, that were so effective that the Universalist Church in America simply shut them down. And how do we respond to evil in 1892? Again, we refer to the Reverend Edward Everett Hale, that we have to do more than displace falsehood. A heady faith, a faith that touches heads but never hearts, a faith that is not rooted and grounded in salvation for both the oppressor and the oppressed, cannot touch and transform our lives. It will not make us the Unitarian Universalists, the Unitarians and Universalists that we seek to be. I know this rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I said, I know my fears will burn away. And to those fears, I say, let it burn, let it burn. Gotta let it burn, let it burn, let it burn. It is 2092. We have completed the process of revisiting Article 2 in our UUA bylaws and removed them from the bylaws because it's a weird thing to have our core theological values, our principles, purposes, mission, and freedom of faith statement in bylaws that can be changed by a majority vote. So we've taken care of that. Wishful thinking. It is 2092, and we have already reviewed Article 2 several more times, but we did such a great job in 2023 that most of it remains intact from that time. We have to answer some questions about how we are going to grow as Unitarian Universalists. And dear ones, I need your help here. Some of you listening now are going to still be alive to make this true in 2092. What are we doing at that point in time that helps us grow, not only numerically, but spiritually, in our ability to love and our ability to tend to one another? If you have some ideas about what we're doing in 2092, please put it in the chat pod. I'm going to incorporate it. I'm going to keep on moving. We're going to run long today. It's all right. It's 2092. It's 2092, and we understand that how we respond to evil in the world is a dynamic process. Evil is not just something that we can imagine, make manifest, and respond to in a way that we can dismantle it forever and always. Evil is more insidious than that. Evil is like the smog that creeps up through the valleys of the Los Angeles River Basin, only to be removed by the rains of justice and change. Evil is in the soil sometimes. It can even be a response that was unexpected to actions that we've been continuing for so long. While I was visiting some family earlier in this week, we remarked upon the fact that sometimes, no matter what we do, the information we have at the time will lead to unintended consequences that we cannot possibly begin to perceive, imagine, or take into account. There are decisions that we, justice-making people, justice-seeking people, justice-loving people right now are making that will lead to unintended evil consequences that will leave our successors wondering, what on earth were they thinking? All that I ever ask of us and of myself is that we do our best, that we optimize what we're doing. And I do believe that we are all doing our best, but to do our best in a way that the people who inherit this living and lively tradition from us will say, you know what? They struggled hard and the only way they knew how. It is 2192. None of us is alive. For the love of God, I hope none of us is alive. What are we doing right now in 2021 to answer the questions of who we will be in 2192? How do we grow to be those people in 2192? And how do we respond to the evils of 2192 that, based on our history we've held today, are likely to be very familiar to us still? If you've got some ideas, put it in chat pod. I know you're thinking. I know you're thinking. If these ideas have to remain only on your heart, that's all right. But do talk to one another about it. Do talk to one another about it. Dear ones, I don't know that Unitarian Universalism even survives this century. But of some things I am certain. I am prayerful that liberal religion and the values that inform it shall never perish from this earth. Whether that is Unitarian Universalism, a very new faith, even by our own measures, with deep roots, or something new and more responsive to the times, the world needs liberal religion. The world needs liberal religion. And in this time, in this 2192 time, we know and understand the struggles of all peoples, and we continue to learn and listen. We have done some great work of covenanting, of being able to respond to the needs of one another. And we know it's hard work that we will never perfect. In 2192, we have become a people prayerfully that have figured out how to be sanctuaries for the world instead of sanctuaries from the world. I say again, we have figured out how to be sanctuaries for the whole world instead of a place to take sanctuary from the onslaughts of the world. We all need rest. We all need breaks. I assure you that whatever problem is going on, it will still be there after you take a nap. Take the nap and then get back to struggling when you can. But at church, we're here about business, and that business is building the beloved community. And for that reason, we can't take sanctuary here. We can't take sanctuary here. We have to figure out how to be sanctuary in everything that we do. And how we respond to evil in 2192, again, this is some conjecture, but as best as I can tell, we are responding intersectionally. We have a holistic way of valuing who should risk and who might gain from the risks that we take. Each of us, all of us, are willing to take appropriate risks inside of the relationships that we have built. We have considered beforehand who has the most effective relationships to be successful, and which new relationships do we need to build in order to dismantle evil every time we come up against it. Dear ones, I think you know the beloved community is not very different from any place we know or have known. The beloved community is a set of practices that allows us to respond to the needs of one another in the most intimate of ways, to know fully and experience fully that suffering among any of us is suffering for all of us, and to know that the quest against evil, the quest to bring more love into this world, is ceaseless and requires each of us and all of us. It's 2021, and we are figuring out who we are as Unitarian Universalists. We are figuring out how to grow into accountable relationships. And we are doing our best to respond to evil in the world courageously. We hold history, but holding history is only one part of the stories that we tell one another. Here at the end of time, as all moments before now have been, we know that the story never ended with us. And holding history is as much about relearning the stories that we left out in the first place as making new stories that can hold each of us and all of us. Dear ones, I know that as for me and our house, we're making justice boldly, courageously, and letting our fears burn away. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.